Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. The Florida Gators have landed one of the more talented offensive tackles in the transfer portal, Kiyaunta Goodwin, coming over from Kentucky. He's staying in the SEC. I think this is a massive get for Billy Napier. Again, this is an offensive line that's losing two starters to the NFL draft, a couple guys to the transfer portal. They needed some talent and they needed some depth on the offensive line, and they filled both of those with Kiyaunta Goodwin. Before we get into the player and kind of where this program is going with Kiyaunta Goodwin and this transfer portal class, I just want to say thank you to you guys. The support you guys have shown. The transfer portal has been a wild couple of weeks, and I love talking roster building. I love talking how these college football teams are shaping up after the transfer portal, and the support you guys have shown really does mean a lot. I love making these videos, but I even love more talking ball with you guys in the comment section. So if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We appreciate you guys a lot. Let's get into Kiyaunta Goodwin first. This is a guy as a Michigan fan. I remember wanting him to come to Michigan in that 2022 class. Biggest thing about it, you can't teach this frame. 6'8", 340 pounds coming out of high school. I mean, he has great length. He's a very good athlete for his size, and there's a reason he earned a top 50 national recruiting ranking from 24/7 Sports in that 2022 class. And another thing I want to know, being in the 2022 class, he has 2 years at the least to play for Florida. And you look across the transfer portal, it was really hard to find young offensive tackles. A lot of these guys were third, fourth, fifth-year guys who are hitting the transfer portal and really are just kind of gap year starters. Like they'll start for 1 year and then move on to the NFL or whatever they're doing after. Kiyaunta Goodwin's a guy that you get into this program, you can get your hands on him. You can develop him. And again, the sky is the limit for a guy like Kiyaunta Goodwin. Again, didn't really work out at Kentucky. That offense was kind of in shambles for a majority of the year. And the Florida Gators, I mean, they needed some offensive line depth and talent. Again, losing a guy like O'Cyrus Torrence, the NFL draft, losing a couple guys. I mean, Ethan White, Michael Tarkin going over to USC, a couple other guys who might have been pushing for starting reps through the transfer portal. And then Cameron Waits goes down with an Achilles injury, I believe, late last week. This was an offensive line that was phenomenal last year. One of the few bright spots on that offense for the Florida Gators. And then they're losing a lot of talent. The thing is, they have been able to replace a lot of that talent, whether it's through the 2023 class or that transfer portal class. What I want to do is just take a look at what Billy Napier is doing. And again, we're going to take a look at what they've added. They have lost a lot of guys through the transfer portal. That isn't so uncommon with first, second, third-year head coaches as they kind of come in. A lot of these guys weren't recruited by Billy Napier. Maybe like, I didn't really sign up for this. They hit the transfer portal. And Billy Napier takes a look and says, what kind of personnel, what kind of bodies do I want for what I'm trying to do on the offense and defensive side of the ball to come in? And so you see those teams get active in the transfer portal because they're losing guys, but a lot of guys are coming in. And I kind of like what the Florida Gators are doing with this transfer class. And again, a lot of these guys are starters or at least contributors year one as they get to Florida. Again, Kiyaunta Goodwin had a very high ranking in the transfer portal as well. Didn't really play much for Kentucky besides in reserve. But you talk about it. You can't teach the 6'8", 340-pound athletic prospect like Kiyaunta Goodwin. I would be very surprised if he's not pushing for starting reps at a tackle position. They get another guy on the offensive line, Damian George, who is another guy that was at Alabama. A lot of teams wanted him out of the high school. Another big body. And if you know anything about Billy Napier, he wants those big bodies. You look at big O'Cyrus Torrence. They want to run the football. They want to get big bodies who can move people around. That's what Florida's trying to bring in. Another guy that I really do think, and just kind of looking at this transfer portal as a class as a whole, Teradej Mitchell from Ohio State was a bona fide top 50 recruit coming out of high school, I believe in 2018, goes to Ohio State, kind of gets buried in the depth chart. I don't think this guy is necessarily a bad football player. Again, 6'2", 235 pounds. A reason why he was so highly recruited and ranked out of high school. He's got some game to him. He just kind of didn't really get a chance to show what he was made of at Ohio State. That's another spot that you might be a little concerned with, like Ventrell Miller going to the NFL draft. Mitchell could be a guy that comes in and plays really good ball. Cameron Jackson on the defensive line, he's another guy that's another spot that depth seemed to be a problem for the Florida Gators, and you're losing a guy like Jalen Lee. You're losing a guy like Gervon Dexter, who both those guys were solid. I mean, Gervon Dexter was, in my mind, and I think a lot of Florida Gators' minds, a little bit disappointing. Like, he was a bona fide five-star. He was solid, but never really lived up to that five-star hype. You get Micah Makuza from, I don't think I said that name right, Baylor. Also, probably not a starter coming into Florida, but will add to that depth. And then you got to talk about Graham Mertz, who, again, he was a guy that was highly touted out of high school. Wisconsin is not a very conducive offense to letting quarterbacks cook. I'm not sold on Graham Mertz as being a bust. I think a change of scenery, again, he's only going into his 4th year. He has some years of eligibility left. Whether he starts or not is the question. I would bet he would start with how that quarterback room is starting to look like. But he's a guy that has a lot of talent. Again, a reason he was a top 100 recruit coming out of high school. Billy Napier is going to have a solid offensive line. They're going to run the football with some of those young running backs. Graham Mertz, I think I'm a little bit more optimistic about Graham Mertz and his potential to add some value to this Florida team than I think a lot of people nationally. But again, Florida lost a lot of talent through the transfer portal, but they're getting some guys who it looks like will start early. And again, Billy Napier has a lot to prove. I don't think a lot of Florida fans are absolutely thrilled with his first year in Gainesville. That being said, he's got to do some work on the recruiting trail. I think the class ended up being a little bit disappointing when Jaden Rashada decommitted. If you take a look at that 2023 class, I don't think it was that bad. And you look at a lot, like they kind of lack that blue chip Jaden Rashada guy, but guys like Kelby Collins, they have a lot of guys in the top 150 coming into the program. He's still probably getting used to recruiting at that SEC level. Again, that is a very, very different process. And you're selling a different service and product than what you were selling at ULL. And I think Billy Napier is still kind of getting to work with that. That being said, if you take a look at what these prospects were considering, Florida Gators, they were making a lot of top 3s. They were making a lot of top 5s. They were getting a lot of talented dudes on official visits. Yes, I don't think they finished with a class that Florida Gator fans are thrilled about, but I would be very surprised if this 2024 and 2025 class are much worse than this, because I think he's only getting better. I think he's only going to improve how he's recruiting some of these top level guys, because again, coming from ULL, it's a little bit of a different thing you're selling. Now, Billy Napier still has he's got to prove some stuff to a lot of Florida Gator fans, and I'm not a Florida Gator fan, but he's got to prove some stuff to me as well. But I think the culture is shifting, and when you look at what he's trying to do, he took over a program that Dan Mullen didn't necessarily run into the ground, but there was like a lack of discipline and a lack of culture within that program. A lot of guys transferring, a lot of guys opting out. Didn't seem to be a lot of passion in that locker room. Billy Napier's a guy that you're going to come in. It's not going to be pretty, but you're going to do stuff the right way. That's kind of how he branded himself coming out of ULL. And that's a 180 from what Dan Mullen was doing with this Florida Gators team. And I think it's going to take a little bit of time to kind of get the guys that are buying into what Billy Napier's selling. That being said, I think when this clicks, I really do think Billy Napier can get Florida competing for SEC titles again. Interested to see what they do in this quarterback class in 2024, because, again, you got to get a guy, especially missing out on Jaden Rashada. Now you're kind of leaving empty-handed in 2023. Graham Mertz has to be your guy for maybe a year or two. Florida might be in the market for another transfer after in spring ball as well, because you might want to get another guy competing with Graham Mertz. But I think Florida's going in the right direction, but either way I slice it, Kiyaunta Goodwin coming to Florida is a massive get. He's a very, very talented offensive tackle that every team in the country wanted coming out of high school in 2022. He's still young. He has a lot of eligibility left to kind of develop into a star left tackle that I think he can develop into. Again, wanted to keep this one short, but Kiyaunta Goodwin, a massive hit for the Gators. If you do enjoy the content, again, consider subscribing to the channel. That helps the boys out a lot. We appreciate you guys. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.